Howdy, folks. Today we're going to continue our discovery into what synthesis is and figuring out how we apply synthesis in order to improve our own line of reasoning and understand others. So the specific tasks we're looking at today are, number one, we're going to continue to work on emphasizing the relationship between these different pieces and parts of our argument. So our evidence has got to connect to our claims, has got to connect to our thesis, and we do that through adding our own personal commentary. And then we're also probably more directly going to be addressing the idea of how do we identify and analyze lines and patterns of reasoning, and how might that affect someone's argument. So we need to talk about this idea of reasoning and developing this concept of a line of logic. So if A equals B and B equals C and C equals D, then we can follow that line of logic all the way to say A equals D. This is very algebraic in a sense, and there's a couple ways that we can take a look at this. Today we're just going to be covering induction and deduction, but there'll also be some readings if you want to take this idea a little bit further to learn about some really classic and useful, very effective ways to structure your own arguments to make sure you're accounting for all factors. So first off, we're going to talk about induction. So induction in an argument means that we are taking pieces and parts. We're taking our specific pieces of evidence and lining it up to say, when we look at all of this, here is the logical conclusion. For example, we'll look at some specific ideas here. If I can prove that regular exercise promotes weight loss, and I can prove exercise lowers stress levels, then I can prove, like putting these two things together, that ultimately exercise improves mood and your outlook, right? If you are losing weight, you're feeling better about yourself. If you are lowering stress, you're feeling better about yourself. So it makes sense. If we look at this specific result of exercise and this specific result of exercise, here's going to be sort of my universal principle. So a specific to broad conclusion, that's considered induction. Like all of our pieces and parts point to this idea. This is countered, not necessarily countered, but the opposite would be deduction. Deduction is probably what we're most commonly used to in an academic setting, where I'm going to start with, here's the thing that I'm proving, and then I'm going to select the best pieces of evidence to prove that thing. So, for example, I might start off with this major premise, this idea that exercise contributes to better health. Boom, that is my universal truth. And then I'm going to take a look at the specifics that kind of back that up to lead me to my conclusion. So if this major premise is true, exercise contributes to better health, and then this lesser idea that yoga is a type of exercise, well, then I can follow this line of logic from big idea, really broad idea, down to very specific idea that yoga contributes to better health, because yoga is a type of exercise. It helps me to view these as kind of like narrowing or broadening pyramids. So if I'm looking for deductive reasoning, going from broad to specific, I would think of this argument something like this. Exercise contributes to better health. More specific, yoga is a type of exercise. Even more specific, yoga contributes to better health. Often I will, in academic papers, structure my introduction this way, where I've got a broad statement and I'm narrowing it down and I'm narrowing it down until I get to my thesis. For inductive reasoning, we would kind of flip that. I would say, hey, yoga contributes to better health because of this and because of this. So I'm kind of taking my specific idea and I'm broadening it, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So this is not necessarily like, you don't have to do one or the other. A lot of times we'll do both of these in creating an argument. So for an example, induction, right? Having a series of examples leading to a specific point may be used to verify a major premise. So like, think about that introduction. So here's an example, here's an example, here's an example. This all leads, boom, to my thesis. And then I will take that that kind of universal truth, and that will become the foundation for my deductive reasoning. So I'm going to say this is true, and this is true, and this is true, and this is true, and that narrows us down to this one specific conclusion, like unchangeable if we look at these pieces of evidence. And ideally, that's how our papers are formatted, right? Where we're leading up to our thesis, and then we're using our thesis to back up some ideas, or using some ideas to back up our thesis, really. And by reading and understanding all of these claims and reasonings and evidence, that can lead us to this one singular conclusion. So as you are reading other people's arguments, and as you're crafting your own, I want you to work on identifying and noting the effect of these different structural choices that an author might use to create different, I guess, formats of reasoning, right? So when you're reading an introduction or conclusion, think about what is being presented in these things. Like, are these specific ideas or are these broad ideas? And how is the author leading you by presenting these first or last, right? And do keep in mind that when I say introduction and conclusion, I'm not just meaning first and last paragraph. An introduction might take multiple paragraphs. Same thing with conclusion. So note that. Pay attention to when and where evidence is given. How specific is that evidence? What is it actually supporting? Pay attention to where the thesis comes in. Like, do they list it right off the front and then use the rest of the paper to defend it? Or do they build all these different pieces of evidence, working on an inductive style of reasoning to lead you to this one unquestionable conclusion? And then try to note those transition pieces. Where do we go from evidence 1 to evidence 2, or claim 1 to claim 2, or introduction to the next idea, right? Being able to identify where and how an author is shifting between ideas really helps improve that structural technique in our own writing. So I can see what this author's doing, maybe emulate that next time I'm writing. Like, oh, that was effective. That worked for me. How do I apply that in my own writing? So just some quick takeaways. If we're going to list some vocabulary words, inductive reasoning is going from a specific idea to a broad idea. And deductive reasoning is starting from that broad idea, narrowing it down to your specific one. And then we're just really trying to pay attention to this idea of structure in an argument. Making note, where's our introductions? What's said there? Where are different claims? How are those claims backed up? Where does the conclusion start? Where are these transitions? How does this person transition? If I can chunk that up, helps my analysis of this piece, my understanding of their line of reasoning and patterns becomes a lot more clear. All right. Good luck, folks.